The Next Generation mini dress uniform, also known as the Skant, has become a fascinating footnote in Star Trek history. Their extra short skirt made them particularly eye-catching, but what made them the stuff of legend was that they appeared on men, which is still looked upon by many as an emasculating thing.
Should we be in skants for this?
Nobody wears those anymore. Don't overthink it.
That said, the Skant wasn't just a token gesture of gender equality intended for background use. That was hardly the case. These things were highly engineered, possibly over-engineered, which took into account practical considerations from wearing something this short. Though as we all know, that wouldn't be the case, as they became just another one of those things that happened, then vanished, never to be brought up again. There's more here than meets the eye, and we'll leave no stone unturned. So let's get going. This is the complete story of the Next Generation Skant. Let's start off with the term Skant. It's an amalgam of the words skirt and pants, which the costume is neither of. It's a mini dress. Outside of Star Trek, Urban Dictionary is the only other place I've seen it used, which is for this. The Skant only appeared in a handful of episodes, mostly from the first season. By the second season, it was combined with pants, which didn't make them stand out as much, and they were relegated to the background. They made their debut during the opening minutes of the series premiere, Encounter at Farpoint. They're essentially introduced at the same time as the jumpsuit uniform. The men's and women's variants are seen in engineering while Picard tours the ship. The variants are essentially the same, but the men's version uses short boots, likely the same ones from the jumpsuit variant. Later in the episode, the men's version is seen again up close in the foreground as the crew prepares for saucer separation. The presentation of the costume doesn't call any special attention to itself, it's very matter-of-fact. Two of the main cast wore them. It was Troy's primary outfit during the episode. Tasha Yar also appeared at one ever so briefly in the final shot of the episode. For both of them, it was a one-time thing and never happened again. Aside from the flashbacks in the final episode, all good things. Why would these uniforms be relegated to the background? The answer is pretty straightforward and exactly what you would think. Here's what the costume designer William Ware Theiss recounts. In quote, "There was usually a problem on set because some wisecracks were always made. Now, moving on to a more practical issue, there are certain inherent risks that come along with wearing something this short. The Skant skirt portion extended only a handful of inches at most beyond one's space dock region, though there were built-in precautions. Alex Beard from the channel Obsessive Costuming Dude got his hands on an actual screen-used Skant and discovered some of its inner workings. Behind the front skirt flap, the black material extends back between the legs and snaps to a corresponding flap in the back. Just above that, there are corresponding upper flaps. The upper one wraps across the front waist, and the back flap across the back waist. These two sets of flaps seem to be designed to anchor the skirt portion of the costume from riding up and provide a small level of privacy. LeVar Burton once said, "I never got a chance to wear the skirt. I always thought it would have been absolutely cool to parade around in it for one afternoon." There's a lot more to the Skant, with quirks in its design and a seemingly over-engineered zipper system. Check out Alex's blog where he details every inch of the Skant. Literally, he details every single inch of the Skant. And if you're into cosplay, check out his online store where he has detailed sewing patterns on some deep cuts, like this Season 1 Admiral's uniform. Links for both are in the description. The jumpsuit variant also took precautions concerning one's Decker unit. The men wore special briefs to smooth things out and conceal their VPL.
Because of course the men can't have a VPL, visible panty line.
These briefs concealed the men's VPL, and you can conceal yourself online, your data, personal information, and even your location using a VPN. Using the virtual private network is like activating an online cloaking device. You can privately and anonymously traverse the web without anyone collecting that information on you, even your own internet service provider. Surfshark VPN comes in handy while producing content for this channel, and they reached out to sponsor this video. Aside from the privacy protection, there are other perks like gaining access to streaming service content from outside your region. I'm in the US, and if I want to pop over to Australia's Netflix selection for something I can't find here in the US, with just a click, I can make it appear like I'm down under, and I am in. If any of that sounds good to you, then check out Surfshark VPN. Using the link in the description and this promo code, you can get 3 free months when you sign up for a 2-year plan. And the key part about it is that there's a 30-day money-back guarantee if you find that it's simply not for you. So if you'd like to shield yourself from your ISP's watchful eye, or really anyone's watchful eye, and gain access to that extra location hopping flexibility, then check out Surfshark VPN from the link in the description or the QR code at the end. Alright, on with the Skant. Now the Skant didn't appear just out of nowhere. Its roots can be traced back to the earliest days of Star Trek. TNG's William Ware Theiss wasn't just any costume designer, he was the Star Trek costume designer. He's responsible for the original series uniforms, the paradigm of colors, blue, red, and gold indicating the divisions, and the Starfleet logo itself. The Starfleet emblem was a relatively small detail on the original costumes, but that emblem over the left side of the chest has been the one constant across all the uniforms that have appeared through all the timelines, TV shows, and movies. It's the one thing tying together this eclectic collection of costumes from multiple costume designers across multiple decades. He joined at the very genesis of Star Trek, when Roddenberry hired him onto the series pilot The Cage. From the get-go, Theiss established a fictional future where Starfleet uniforms were mostly gender neutral, except for the collars. But the overall function and utility of the two variants were the same. When the series moved into full production, the uniforms received redesigns. The men sported black collars now,
and women wore less.
As the story goes, Grace Lee Whitney, who played Yeoman Janice Rand, asked Theiss to design a skirt variant of the uniform that, in her words, should be sensational and would stop traffic. During a more conservative time, it was seen as a symbol of feminine empowerment by some, and something to appeal to the target demographic by others. The mini dress uniform would end up having a devastating effect on Whitney's well-being, with her resorting to amphetamines to maintain the expected body weight for a uniform like this. The men would also be put into sexualized costumes, but far less often, like Kirk rocking the mononip toga. Following the cancellation of the original series, Theiss collaborated with Roddenberry a few more times, including Genesis 2 in 1973, a TV movie set in the future with people wearing togas, and Strange New World in 1975, another TV movie set in the future with people wearing togas. When Star Trek Phase 2 came around, Roddenberry once again recruited Theiss to the series. As a cost-saving measure, the initial plan was to reuse the original series uniforms, including the mini-dress variant. Theiss's contribution to the show wasn't limited to the clothing that appeared on screen. At times he even took an active role in shaping the story. Phase 2 would have had James Kirk start off with the rank of Admiral, before taking back the rank of Captain to command the Enterprise. In this internal memo, Theiss suggested that Kirk start off as a Commodore. You may recall from the episode Doomsday Machine that the USS Constellation was commanded by a Commodore instead of a Captain. Theiss proposed that Kirk start off Phase 2 as a Commodore, so it wouldn't require a demotion for him to command the Enterprise again. Though, as we all know, Phase 2 never made it out of pre-production. When Phase 2 transitioned into the first movie, director Robert Weiss replaced him. He criticized Theiss' work as being like pajamas. He brought in a new costume designer, Robert Fletcher, with the direction to be more science fact than science fiction. In an interview, Fletcher said that he wanted to give the costumes a solid feeling of reality, clothing that people could work and live in efficiently. He goes on to say, in a not-so-subtle jab at the original series mini-dress, that, in quote, the last thing a female crew member needs in a red alert situation is to worry about a run in her pantyhose. The Star Trek movies would continue, but without Roddenberry producing after the turbulent production on the first film. In the meantime, after losing creative control over the movies, Roddenberry once again got his hands on a new TV series to continue his version of Star Trek. Roddenberry got the old band back together, including Theiss. With the Next Generation set over 70 years after the original series, Theiss could start from a blank slate when designing the new uniforms. From an early stage, he locked into having the uniforms being tighter and more form-fitting than his work on the original series. The Skant was also being designed alongside the standard jumpsuit uniform, showing just how committed he was to bringing them to screen. As you can see here, he wasn't remotely interested in adhering to any conventional depictions of masculinity. Just about the only traditional Star Trek convention that he carried over from the original series was the return of the 3-color division paradigm. This internal memo identified these using the Pantone standardized color matching system, with mustard, wine, and teal. The show swapped the command gold and operations red, with the command officers now wearing the red, and operations now wearing the gold.
Everything about this seems wrong.
There was never a definitive reason provided, but the general sentiment is that they made the switch because Patrick Stewart looks better in red. TNG was Theiss's chance to respond to the criticism about the original series mini dresses. Women were given the option to wear pants, and the men were given the options to show off their kneecaps. Theiss explained in an interview, having the actresses and actors both in skirts was to diffuse any sexist accusations that might have been associated with designs from the original show. Star Trek The Next Generation would bookend his career. He would depart the series at the end of Season 1 and pass away in 1992. But not before one final toga. Or at least something that looks like a toga. Star Trek The Next Generation had a toy line, but the Skant didn't make the cut. If it were going to appear, it would have been on Troy, but she's the only character not to get a figure. There also wasn't a Skant option for the kid's costume. But this wasn't the end of the mini dress uniform. It returned in the J.J. Abrams Kelvin timeline. While Theiss used the Skant to challenge gender presentation norms, the J.J. mini dress was a kitschy affectation playing on Star Trek's pop culture iconography. In that regards, philosophically, they're polar opposites, though it still had the same challenges with covering up one's final frontier.
I just remember I kept being reminded by all my male cast members that I was flashing.
Though as fate would have it, the Skant would come full circle. Theiss's contribution to Star Trek started with The Cage in 1964. His Skant lives on in spirit on Strange New Worlds, coincidentally taking place during the same era of Star Trek, where the original portrayal of Number 1 wore the tunic and trouser uniform variant. Rebecca Romaine's version of Number 1 often wears the mini dress variant with black leggings or tights. Romaine specifically asked for the mini dress variant to be designed for her character. She wanted to break from the sci-fi trope of female badasses being defined by masculine stereotypes. As she puts it, I actually want to make sure that Starfleet dress goes into action and turn it into a badass Starfleet dress, so it's not just like a flight attendant standing around on the Enterprise. Staying aligned with Theiss's vision, the Strange New Worlds Skant is worn by male crew members as well, albeit out of focus and in the background. Here, this crew member in Operations Red wears it with leggings. The Skant has affectionately appeared in Star Trek Online as well. Had the Skant caught on during TNG's first season, we can only speculate how it would have altered the look of Star Trek going forward. Now, would Star Trek The Next Generation have been taken seriously if Captain Picard rocked a Skant in the pilot episode? And would the show have lasted 7 years and spun off into all the different movies and TV shows had the men wore Skants? Well, have fun with those thought experiments, and I'd be glad to hear your thoughts in the comments. At the end of the day, was the Skant silly? Yes, absolutely, but that's a part of its charm. The fan culture has turned what could have been an awkward footnote in Star Trek history into a beloved anomaly. It's a creation straight out of the ethos of Star Trek's vision of a utopian future where clothing choices aren't shackled by any social stigma. Someone could go to work in one of these without raising an eyebrow. You'd just have to be a tad more cautious, doing things like reaching up for things, stepping out of the way, stepping over chairs, sitting in chairs. But most importantly, you'd have to be extra careful around.
Careful, the next rock is loose.